Hello, and welcome to another episode of my Type 35 build. As most of the work continues to be on the inside of the car, the outside remains largely untouched. Well, not entirely untouched. The car still looks the same from the front, but if we move back to the rear of the car, you can see a fuel tank nestled inside the boat tail and its fuel filler neck just peeking out of the bodywork. The tank itself sits on a pair of brackets that I carved out of plate steel, and they bolt to the car's frame because I have a thing for bolt-in parts, even when they are handmade. I measured and rough cut the filler neck opening in the tail. The pencil line is where the body will get finish trimmed to center the opening around the filler neck itself, so the two will be spot on and gives me enough room to fit a leather filler apron between the two, just like an original Type 35 has. Back to the fuel tank itself, it's a 4-gallon galvanized tank intended for a stationary application. I looked at a lot of different options, and most wouldn't fit because, as large as the space looks, it gets a lot smaller when you have to account for suspension movement. I could have had a tank custom made to fit the space, but that presented problems of its own. Then I found this tank and thought, now that's perfect. It's galvanized, so no corrosion issues. Looks like a real fuel tank instead of a welded up box, and it fits right in the spot I need it to. The brackets supporting the tank are built from 1/4-inch steel plate and triangulated, so despite their rather spindly appearance, they're surprisingly strong. They attach to the frame by bolting into the rear shock mounts, and they're drilled so I can get a wrench on the back of the shock tensioning bolts to adjust them. Most importantly, they allow the shocks room to rotate vertically as its suspension compresses without anything hitting the brackets or the fuel tank itself. And on the passenger's side, it's exactly the same, only opposite. Not like an evil version, but more like if the driver's side looked into a mirror and said, "Hey, you're one handsome bracket." The fuel filler was a bolt-on fuel cell neck that I cut the flange off of and welded to the top of the fuel tank. It came with a vent tube, so I kept that, and I'll plumb it when it comes time to install the fuel system. Which is going to be pretty cool because the cutout in the top of the tank where the original fuel level sight gauge was, I'm going to fab up a plate and use the opening for the fuel system return line to bolt into. Overall, the whole assembly came out looking pretty nice and allows room for everything that's going to be fitted inside the tail of the car. Which, if you look, you can see under the tank, there's enough room for the suspension to compress, room to get to the shocks to adjust them, and with the tank brackets being a bolt-on part, should I decide to modify the tank in the future, they can be removed and adapted to fit much easier than if they'd have been hard welded in place. There's a strand of fiberglass. It's on my hand. It's like a spider web. All right. Where was I? Oh yeah. I'm contemplating a third mounting tab, or maybe some speed holes. I don't know. Something along the base of the bracket. I haven't decided yet. One of the biggest reasons for not having a fuel tank that occupies all the space in the tail is when you get down under the tank, there's enough room to reach back and get to the upper control arm mounts, as well as the ride height adjustment bolts, without having to remove the fuel tank or the boat tail from the car, which is kind of important. If I were going to try and increase fuel capacity though, I would probably mount a couple small tanks on either side of the drive line, just behind the seat bases. There's plenty of room and they'd be completely out of sight. I don't know. It's a possibility, but At 4 gallons, I don't think it'll be an issue. This tank should get me somewhere around 120 miles, maybe more. I figure after that far, you're going to want to get out and stretch your legs anyway. Besides, what fun is a road trip if you don't give everyone at the gas stations a chance to oogle over your car?